Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on the IHI Call 6, Topic 2, on development of evidence-based practical guidance for sponsors on the use of real-world data / real-world evidence. So my name is Nassima. I'm your moderator for today, and before we start the session, I will share with you some information. So as usual, we are recording this webinar, and we will share the recording and the slides on the IHI website and on the B2Match platform by the end of the day. Also, the call has been launched this morning, and all the links and details of how to apply have been published on the IHI website and on the funding and tenders portal. Another important point, so if you have any question, please address them on the chat box in the chat box panel in the B2 platform during the session, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. So today I have with me online a few people. So I have Colm Carroll, who is the scientific officer for this topic, and he's going to kick off with the presentation. We also have Emel Mashaki, from Novo Nordisk, who is going to present the topic itself. And we have Carolina, who is my colleague. She's the legal officer, and she will be also addressing some legal questions if you have any. So now I will hand over to my colleague Colm for the presentation.
Thank you, Nassima, and good morning and welcome everyone from me as well. So as Nassima said, my name is Colm Carroll and I'm a scientific officer here at IHI, and I'm following this particular topic from topic idea and through the evaluation process. So I'm going to present briefly on the IHI program, as this is relevant for you to be able to put forward feasible proposal submissions. And then I'll hand over to Emel from the industry consortium, who will present on the topic itself, as you can see on the screen. And finally, we'll come back to me and I will talk a little bit about how the submission works, how the evaluation works, and conclude with a few tips on how to be as successful as possible in writing and submitting your proposal. We are not going to cover today the rules and procedures for IHI two-stage calls. We had a webinar yesterday on this, an extensive webinar with lots of questions and lots of answers. So I will ask you to refer to that webinar for questions on the rules and procedures. And you can see the link there on the screen. Okay, so on the next slide, I have a little bit of an intro to the Innovative Health Initiative. So IHI is a partnership, a public-private partnership between the European Union, represented by the European Commission, and several healthcare industry associations. These are namely COSIR, which is focusing on imaging, radiotherapy, IT, and so on, FPA, which is the Pharmaceutical Industry Association in Europe, and Vaccines Europe, obviously representing vaccine organizations, vaccine industries, Europa Bio, representing smaller biotech companies, and then MedTech Europe, which looks at medical technology, digital health, and so on. And the idea behind IHI is that by combining forces between these industry sectors, the companies under these associations, with publicly funded organizations such as hospitals, universities, SMEs, regulators and health technology assessment agencies, by combining forces, we can do something more than would normally be possible. And therefore, we as an initiative, we fund public-private partnership projects to do exactly that. And on the next slide, our objectives are to, first of all, take some health research, health innovations, and bring them as close as possible to patients and society as possible, so that we can really benefit patients. So we don't necessarily fund the latest blue sky research. We're more about translating some innovations that perhaps are nearly ready to go and bringing them close to patients and physicians and so on. On the second bullet here, we want to obviously deliver safe and effective health innovations to patients, and we covered the entire spectrum of care. So starting from prevention, diagnosis, monitoring, treatment. And we have a focus particularly on areas which are not currently very well addressed. And then finally, as a public-private partnership, we want to make sure that Europe's health industries become even more globally competitive. And therefore, we also want to support the industries in doing this work. So as well as being a public-private partnership here at the IHI office, as mentioned, all our projects are also public-private partnerships. They are selected via open and competitive calls for proposals, which is why you're here today to explain that process. And each of these projects is a partnership bringing together contributions from those industry sectors I mentioned, from specific companies under these umbrella associations, and publicly funded organizations from the public funding coming from the European Commission. So just a little bit about how the process works, how we go from kind of call launch through to project launch. So now obviously the call has just been launched this morning. You'll find the details on our website as mentioned. We now hand the process over to you as applicants. And we ask you to form consortia, and these consortia should apply to the public funding part of the eventual consortium. So you are forming publicly funded organization consortium consisting of, as already mentioned, academic research centers, hospitals, and very importantly for this particular topic, health technology assessment agencies, regulators, patient groups, and so on. You form consortia and you apply to the call addressing the needs of the topic text, which we'll come on to in a second. We expect multiple consortia to form, we expect multiple proposals to be submitted, and therefore we run an evaluation. And this evaluation is run by independent experts, and we instruct them to select the single best consortium. So the single consortium that best addresses the needs of the topic text, and then they go through to stage 2, which is on the next slide, which is where the best applicant consortium merges with the industry consortium, and together they write a much more detailed full proposal about what they intend to do and how to run their project. This proposal also undergoes an evaluation, and if the evaluators say this proposal is good enough to be funded, it goes through to project launch, which is on the final slide here of this series. So your job for now as potential applicants is at the first step here, short proposal submission. You have to identify suitable partners, come together, and then make sure you're addressing the full scope of the topic. So now I'm going to hand over to Emel from the industry consortium, who is going to explain the scope of the topic. And when she finishes, it'll come back to me and I'll give you those few tips on how to submit a successful proposal. So Emel, please, over to you.
Thank you so much, Colm, for the introduction, and welcome everyone. Good morning. So I'm Emel Mashaki, and I'm joining you from Novo Nordisk. I'm Vice President in Global Regulatory Affairs here, based in Copenhagen. I'll take you through the proposal, the initiative that we have for IHI Call 6, the topic 2, and following my presentation, I will be joined by Antoine from Sanofi to address any further questions. So as you can see from the title of the proposal, we're aiming for the development of an evidence-based practical guidance for sponsors on the use of real-world data, real-world evidence. And in the next slide, I can explain to you why there's a need for a public-private cross-sector collaboration within this project. And that's important because this collaboration will provide access to varied data sources. And that actually includes, and it's also not limited to, more private-public collaboration that would enable access to various sources of data. And that would include national, regional databases, healthcare providers, HCP's data, clinical sites, industry-specific data, especially with regards to the use cases, which we're going to really use in this initiatives to build the foundation for a future proposal. Then it's also important through the private-public partnership that we have some sort of a good support to enable a collaboration and alignment with regulatory stakeholders. And that includes actually healthcare technology bodies, regulatory authorities, payers, in order to ensure that whatever we developed as a practical guidance could align with the existing regulatory framework that we do have, and that there's no duplication or misalignment, and addresses their expectations in order to facilitate the acceptance and adoption for a future progress. Then it's also important within this initiative that we have a strong stakeholder engagement, especially with other stakeholders like patients and also stakeholders from the health care system, in order to facilitate the engagement and get a range of inputs to make sure that this guidance could reflect the needs and the perspectives and can really address the concerns of all relevant parties involved in real-world data and real-world evidence utilization, since this space is quite broad and have a multi-sector, multi-stakeholder involvement and alignment need in this initiative. In my next slide, I will be explaining why did we specifically develop the topic text as is, as you can see today, and what was actually the challenge that we have seen that really facilitated the evolving of this topic text. So basically, we want to develop a practical guidance for real-world data, real-world evidence in healthcare decision-making. And that's because for the time being, currently, despite the huge interest and the broad interest in the real-world data and real-world evidence utilization and regulatory decision-making and healthcare decision-making, we still lack in the industry a structured evidence-based and practical guidance that could be utilized to clarify the use of real-world data, real-world evidence, both in regulatory and health technology assessment, including payer decision-making. So there is a lack of that very practical guidance for the time being within the industry and within the sponsors. Then there's also a challenge of finding a custom-made and there's a non-standardized approach for real-world evidence, real-world data submissions that would require a significant amount of expertise and sometimes effort, both from the sponsors but also from the decision makers, that could really land into a meaningful progression or into meaningful decision making. Then we could also see that there is also variation in regulatory frameworks entailed in focusing on medicinal products and medical devices, which could also lead to different experiences and needs among stakeholders, and especially to come up with a final kind of an aligned and standard approach for decision making. So those are the key main challenges that we have actually mapped, and that was actually the foundation for us to build the topic text for this initiative. In my next slide, I will try to take you into a much more visualized step-by-step approach for you to see and understand what are the steps that we visualize for this topic text. So it does entail, in essence, around 4 steps, with the step 0, where we're going to look into mapping all the available materials and guidances and practices relevant to the project in terms of the real-world evidence and the real-world data landscape. It's important in the step 0 to understand what do we have existing at the time being, so that we don't also duplicate, and we try to build on what do we have in the regulatory landscape. And that would require a thorough also look and mapping of all the methodologies, guidelines, practices that have already been used in this space. The step 1 then starts with having an in-depth analysis and a look into all the available methodologies and guidelines, but also with an in-depth look into the use cases that have been already explored or are being explored with regards to the real-world data, real-world evidence. And that doesn't really require those real use cases to be successful or not. I think it's more important that we have an in-depth look into what use cases that have been utilized before and have been assessed for a decision making. We are expecting that the step 0, where the mapping of the real-world evidence landscape and the analysis phase would take approximately 1 year, because that will lay a strong foundation for the second step. The second step will then entail a development of the methodology, and that will be based on the findings from the use cases analysis, and then that could also help us build a draft of a possible methodology and document based on recommendation and commonalities that we could really identify through the different use cases. So it will really entail a categorization exercise, and also looking into what are the commonalities and what are the common grounds that we could really utilize and benefit from to build a methodology and a recommendation going forward. And then step 3 will really will be a step where we can really assess the practicality of whatever recommendation we would like to bring forward. And that will also include a pilot phase where we would test the draft guidance that we already built based on the analysis and the methodology building, in order and to see whether that practical guidance could work in the various contexts within the scope of the project. The final step would be actually to gather the inputs, to gather the comments and the learnings from the pilot phase, and merge both the draft recommendation for the guidance with the existing practical pilot phase, and see how we could actually have a final practical guidance document that can be really disseminated afterwards. And that will also include dissemination and some training plans to ensure that there's an alignment and a standard approach in understanding how the practical guidance could serve the sponsors in that sense. So that's very briefly to explain the scope and to take you step by step into the milestones that we envisioned for this topic. In the next slide, here you could see roughly and broadly what do we expect as an impact by having a practical guidance to be used by the sponsors in this space. First, we would expect that there would be a harmonized real-world data, real-world evidence submissions among the sponsors in the different areas, that there would be an enhanced use of real-world evidence, real-world data, which could also speak to the ultimate aspiration of regulators also in the EU to enhance the use and acceptability and value of real-world data, real-world evidence in decision-making. That will, of course, also help have a better informed decision-making at the HTA and payers, as well as regulators side. And overall, all this will really help enhance the access to innovative healthcare solutions, and will really have a final impact on patients and their access to the innovative healthcare solutions in various spaces. Next slide. On the other hand, we also expect the outcomes based on the practical guidance for the sponsors on the use of real-world evidence, real-world data. We expect that industry sponsors and other stakeholders can have an access to a structured evidence-based, because it will be based on the use cases, and more practical guidance that will be already tested with pilot phase and based on recommendations on the use of real-world data, real-world evidence. And that would mean that it could provide some sort of a clarity and a roadmap for the industry sponsors to understand how they could really enhance the use of real-world data, real-world evidence for decision-making. There will also be clarity on the focus on medicinal products, medical devices, the therapeutic products that combine a medicinal product with a medical device, and that's actually within the scope of this initiative. And regulators, on the other hand, as well as health technology assessment bodies, payers, would receive a much more structured and consistent real-world data, real-world evidence submissions that could really help them to inform their decision-making at various milestones of developing healthcare solutions. So those are very straightforward expected outcomes that we see by having that practical guidance available for the use of the sponsors, but it also could facilitate and enhance decision-making at the regulators and health technology assessment bodies, decision makers. Then if we move to the next slide, what is expected from the industry consortium as in-kind contribution? The expectation of the industry consortium would include, first and foremost, an industry expertise. And that was actually one of the key motivational elements that we have looked into this topic, is the fact that the industry consortium have enormous amount of information as expertise when it comes to real-world evidence, clinical development, benefit risk assessment, regulatory affairs, health technology assessment, and economics, market access for medicinal products, both on the medical device as well as the combination products, and that as well in the medicinal part. So I think it's important that we make sure that the expected outcome, the contribution from the industry consortium is mainly to provide that kind of valuable contribution based on the expertise that they already have within the industry. Then, of course, we expect that within this project, it is key that there is some sort of an access to the use cases that have already been explored or developed by the different industry consortium members that could be used in order to be assessed, so that we're able to establish a common foundation and a ground to build the draft proposal for a practical guidance. We also expect that within this project that there will be synergies with existing initiatives, and this topic text, this initiative will actually complement and add on the already existing initiatives. The aim is to advance the real-world evidence and real-world data use in Europe, such as Get Real Institute, READY, Real for REG, and Real World for Decisions, and there are many other existing initiatives that we also look into combining the efforts and see where we could create the synergies and complement, and also to speed up the progress to use real-world data, real-world evidence. It also would need to have an aligned in terms of ambitions and guidelines to set out the European healthcare data space. Yeah. So that's actually what we are expecting in terms of contribution from the industry consortium. Next slide. So what do we expect from the applicants in that sense, and what kind of expectations we have, especially in relation to the expertise? So for the applicants, for you, it's important that you have a comprehensive expertise in real-world data, real-world evidence, and that includes, of course, data science, the standards, and understanding of the guidance in this space. The access and linkage to the use of real-world data or synthetic data to evaluate medicinal products, medical device, and combination, because those three will be within the scope of the project, because we want to make sure that it serves a broader also interest areas. Then, of course, a good expertise and knowledge in technical, legal, and ethical requirements to the access and the use of data in the European region, knowledge of products and medical device, the development process for those also health solutions, and the regulations entailing that space. Good understanding and expertise in interacting with regulators, regulatory health authorities, national competent authorities, health technology assessment bodies, notified bodies for devices and payers, because a lot of the work will also need to be in line with the stakeholders who are the decision makers in Europe. Then, of course, it's very important that you have a good expertise in shaping the consumer direct communications, because we have also to ensure that we are getting the right perspective, the right insights and experience from other stakeholders, such as the patients advocacy group, social media reach, and also expertise in healthcare sector communication. A lot of it also have to deal with getting the right input and the right expertise and perspective from those who actually generate the real-world data in the European region. Then that, of course, requires an extraordinary and very strong multi-stakeholder handling skills, also across the different sectors in the projects, citizens, patient representatives group, healthcare providers, clinical sites, contract or research organization, and vendors at different levels, both national and regional levels in terms of databases. Of course, finally, the entire project would really rely a lot on the use of use cases, and it's important that we have a comprehensive expertise here on the table to be able to assess the use cases and to evaluate existing methodologies, guidelines, and practices within the real-world evidence, real-world data space. In my next slide, I can also share here what is also the expected budget. So basically the maximum financial contribution from the IHI joint uptake is actually around 13.3 million euro. And another indicative in-kind and beneficial contribution from the industry beneficiaries is around also 13.3 million. And the expectation is that the project will last around 60 months as of the kickoff date, with some sort of also deliverables that could be delivered earlier, but jointly, including all the alignment with all the stakeholders, we expect the duration of the project to take around 60 months. Then the final slide, it's really to share with you the contact if you have any questions, and if you would like to ask any questions, we're happy to address them.
Great, thank you very much, Emel, for that. And yes, if you do indeed have any questions, please put them in the chat. We've noticed several questions have already arrived. Please keep putting them in, and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. So now just a few slides from me on how to help you submit a proposal, understand how the evaluation works, and then finally a few tips on how to be as successful as possible. So the next slide, just to say, you submit a proposal using the proposal template, which you will find in the Funding and Tenders portal. Now, a proposal is made up of 3 different documents. The first one, Part A, is mostly administrative data, and this is based on web forms that you complete in the Funding and Tenders portal itself. I would suggest you go into the portal straight away to see what is expected of you in this Part A, so that when you're getting close to the deadline for submission, you don't have any surprises. But the bulk of your submission will be in Part B. This is where you put in your ideas, your methodology, your impacts, and so on. And this is based on a template, which as I said, is available in the portal. This template has been designed to guide you to be as successful as possible. In other words, to help make sure you are addressing the needs of the topic in a way that the evaluators will evaluate it. So our big guidance here is to read the instructions in the proposal template very carefully and make sure you use these guidance to help you complete the template. And finally, there is another kind of administrative annex, which is about the participant type, what type of organizations are in your consortium. Again, our advice here is to look at this quite early on so that you don't get any surprises later in the proposal submission process. So my next slide is then on the evaluation process, and in particular, the evaluation criteria. So obviously, after you have submitted your proposal, an independent panel of evaluators will evaluate your proposal, and these are the criteria they use to do that evaluation. So I'm not going to go through these in detail. They're there on the screen, and you'll see them on the slides afterwards. But just to say that we instruct the evaluators to go through each of these criteria one by one and assess your proposal against them. For example, with this first bullet under excellence, we will ask them to make a comment on how clear and pertinent your proposal's objectives are. And then we'll ask them to comment on how ambitious your work is and does it go beyond state of the art. So we're going to take these each in turn, ask them to comment, and then those comments eventually will turn into the score, which is your outcome of the evaluation. So again, our advice here is make sure that you, when you're putting your proposal together, look at these evaluation criteria. Make it easy for the evaluators to use these to assess your proposal. Okay, the template will guide you on this, but it's also a good idea to look at these evaluation criteria themselves. So the evaluation criteria directly map the sections of the proposal itself. So you've got excellence, you've got impact, and then on the next slide, you have implementation. So they're there on the screen just for guidance for you. So just to come to the conclusion then, I'll give you a few tips on how to be as successful as possible. So the first tip is to look at the topic text. Read it several times, get a good understanding of it. The topic text is what you are addressing as applicants. It's also what the evaluators will use to assess your proposal. So please spend some time looking at the topic text. Second piece of advice is start working on your consortium already. So start as early as possible. IHI consortia are generally quite broad in scope. You may have to recruit organizations that you haven't normally worked with before, and finding the best consortium for you to work with can be a challenge. So we suggest you start as soon as possible. And at the same time, always think that we're a public-private partnership. So in this case, your consortium should address the public funding that Emil mentioned. But you should also be aware that you're going to be expected, if you're successful, to merge with the industry consortium to do the project itself. The third bullet is something I've already mentioned, but just to re-emphasize, make the job of the evaluators easy. Give them the information that they want, i.e. follow the template, in a format that makes it easy for them to evaluate your proposal successfully. And finally, as a PPP addressing healthcare, we want you to address some of the barriers to reaching patients. And obviously, regulatory barriers are one of those. So we ask all our projects to consider the potential regulatory impact of their results. I think this comment here is particularly relevant to this particular topic. So I'm sure you will do that in any case. Then my final slide is how to help you find those project partners that are crucial for you to put together a feasible proposal. Obviously, you need to either build your own consortium or join somebody else's consortium. In either case, it's important that you find the right partners. So our advice on this is obviously network with your existing contacts that are relevant to the particular call. It's probably not enough, though, considering the scope of IHI projects. So, of course, use these IHI Call Days to look for interested parties as well. The EU Funding and Tenders portal's got a partner search tool where you can put in some key search terms and find people who are perhaps already active in this area. So please go there. And we have a network of contact points called our States Representative Group. They're basically our national contact points. Their job is to help you be as successful as possible. So please contact them. And I think I saw in the chat a little bit earlier on a comment from the German national contact point. Every member state should have one. And finally, obviously, network on as much as possible, including on our social media. So I'm going to stop here and I'll come back answering the questions later. But for now, I wish you as much success as possible in terms of putting your proposal together.
Thank you very much, Colm, and thank you, Emil, for this presentation. So before we start the question session, I would like to share with you the topic, the session that we had and that we still are having. So the call 7 topic were held last week, and you can find all the recording and the presentation on our IHI website. And the pitching session link to this call 7 will be held next week. And for call 6, we still have one session this afternoon on treatment persistency. So if you would like to attend, you are welcome to come to this session. So now we can start the questions. So I can see that there are a few in. So the first one is from Aurélie, asking, what do you mean by real-world data? Does it refer to particular modalities or sensor types?
Maybe Emil can come in on this, but perhaps I can just start by saying that there's on the first page of the call text, we have a definition of real-world data, and that is that it is routinely collected data relating to a patient's health status or delivery of healthcare from a variety of sources other than traditional clinical trials. So that's kind of the formal definition we use. I know there's several definitions out there. That's the formal definition we're using, but I don't know if Emil wants to complement that in any way.
Yeah, but thank you so much, Com. And I think it's for the timing, it's exactly the general definition for the real world data that we're going to use here, because that's also utilizing as much as possible what do we have in the real world setting, because that adds the most value, right, with regards to the decision making for healthcare solutions to serve patients at the end of the day.
Thank you both for the answer. The second question is from Victoria. So she's asking two questions. The first one is, can you explain the difference between industry sponsor and non-commercial sponsor mentioned in the call text?
Okay, so the industry sponsors here, we're talking about the industry consortiums and actually the producers or the marketing authorization or the sponsors of the healthcare solutions in medicinal products, medical device, or the combination, as we also scoped it within the topic text. The non-commercial sponsors, as we can see, are those who are more involved in the decision making. And also it could be also the stakeholders from I'm just thinking patient associations. It could be also the health technology assessment also bodies. It could be also regulators who do not have a commercial link to the benefit to the product, to the medicinal product, to the device combination, or to the medical device. So that's maybe roughly how you could distinguish between the two sponsors here.
Thank you, Emel. Our second question is, do you suggest or is it advised to cover specific disease area in the use cases?
Yes, I think it's a good question. And we have discussed it also in the industry consortium. Where is it that we would like to discuss, to focus? And in this topic text, we also wanted to make sure that it's also broad as possible as a starting point. So we have not specified it, but we also looked into the chronic serious diseases, and we have not specified specific therapy area for the time being. But it's really to look into the chronic serious disease where we have more availability and access to real-world data to start with. We are also aware of other initiatives that look into more specific disease areas, such as rare disease or oncology specifically. So in this topic text, we want to focus on serious chronic disease.
Perfect, thank you. The next one is from Sandeep. He is asking, for the structure RWD/RWE, is the emphasis on mainly European dataset, or is it broader that includes other ethnic groups, such as Latam, Asia, Africa, as well creating more equitable healthcare?
I think I could share, so the topic text and also this project is focusing, as we mentioned, on the data sets within Europe. However, we could actually see some use cases that could be assessed afterwards where a number of different ethnic groups could be included because if you are a global sponsor, you may have actually use cases where you have used data sets from the global context, and that could actually be looked at during the process. So I don't know, Antoine, if you have anything to add to this, but we have actually focused on Europe. But I understand that some of the use cases that we might actually assess may include data from a global context. And as you mentioned, it could be also to ensure a much more equitable also way to look into the disease modalities and also the decision-making in development. But Antoine, do you have any other comments from your side?
Well, I think that's, thank you, Emel, and thank you for the presentation. I think I totally agree with you. I think that the first focus is on the European data sets, but we can definitely consider that we can enrich a data set for a fit-for-purpose data set with data that can come from Asia or US, for example. That's something that technically we can definitely accept and consider in the different proposal. As the ultimate objective would be to make sure that we have a good understanding of the data that are provided. It means that the scope can be open to additional data set to complement the European data set if there are some gap or missingness.
Yeah, but the focus is actually more European data sets and to look, but as we mentioned, that if the use cases could include other global contexts, that could be assessed during the process.
Correct.
Thank you very much, Antoine and Emel, for replying this question. So Victoria is asking another question. How strong should the focus on synthetic data be in the proposals?
Yeah, and again, I think that is something we need to explore during the proposal, because what is important at the end of the day to see, it's not really to emphasize on one aspect versus another, but it's also to see how strong the contribution from the synthetic data could lead to the draft guidance in that sense, and also represent the good foundation to build for the draft guidance. So I don't have a straight answer to this because we don't know the use cases yet, and I think it's not. It's important to clarify that there is no specific focus on one area, because we need to keep an objective curiosity towards all those use cases and see how can we really work with them to ensure that there is a good understanding to build the foundation on the commonalities and for practical guidance. So that's why, at least from my perspective, I don't think we could say that we are emphasizing more on synthetic data versus other sources of data.
Thank you, Emel. And Victoria would like to have a clarification in one sentence in the call text. The sentence is: the specific obligation described in the condition of the calls and call management rules under specific condition on availability, accessibility, and affordability do not apply, question mark.
I can maybe take this one. I mean, because it does not apply, you don't really need to know this. However, just to say that under some of the topics launched under IHI, these specific obligations in terms of what results, what people should do with the results of the projects apply. In this case, it doesn't apply. So rather than confuse the issue, I just say you don't need to worry about this. Okay, if you want to find out more about this, please contact us at our info desk, and we can of course answer the question then in more detail.
Thank you, Cole. The next one is from Tiago, asking what does pre-identified industry consortium means? And a sub-question, what advantages a predefined industry consortium has when comparing to other / new consortium?
Maybe I can take this initially in any case, because in theory I was supposed to explain this and perhaps I didn't do such a good job. So under IHI's two-stage call system, the way our topics come about is that a group of interested parties from our industry grouping come together and with a common challenge where they're willing to invest their own resources. And they come together and form their own kind of industry consortium, what we call here the pre-identified industry consortium. And then in consultation with our member states, with our scientific panel, we in the office with the industry write a topic text, which is launched, and that's what you've seen. This industry consortium then takes a step back while we ask for a publicly funded consortium to form, submit proposal, which is then evaluated. So at this stage, we're just asking you to look for publicly funded consortium. After the evaluation, the single successful public consortium coming out of the evaluation then merges with the existing industry consortium, which includes Emel, which includes Antoine, and together you will form a single, what we call full proposal consortium, which submits a second proposal, a full proposal, which is also evaluated. So the industry consortium is existing. They're not part of the current submission. They're just there waiting to be matched by the publicly funded consortium. So you as an applicant, you're more interested now in getting together with other organizations, looking for public funding and addressing the public funded part of the topic text. I hope that answers your question, but please, if you need more information, please put another question in the chat.
Thank you, Cole. The next one is from Anna. Can patient association be included in the consortium? And in that case, should they be at European level, or would it be sufficient to include national association as well?
I think it's a very good question, and as you can see also through within the topic text and also in my presentation, patient association can be part of the consortium because they also provide an important also perspective on and also a source of data. And of course, as long as they are from representing the European, I would say, perspective, that could be discussed whether they need to be at the regional or at the national level. But I think what's important is that we bring a patient association if they're interested in the consortium, because they can also be an important stakeholder.
Thank you. Next one is from Kale. Is the public consortium envisioned to include SMEs and other industry partners, or should the commercial partner mainly be already predefined industry partners?
Maybe I can answer this in terms of the funding.
Please.
Yeah. So our funding in these calls is available for industry organizations, SMEs, and what we call mid-caps, which are organizations with a turnover of up to 500 million. And generally the expectation would be that these type of organizations come on the publicly funded side of the consortium. So I don't know what type of organization you're coming from, but if you're an SME, if you're a mid-cap, there's no problem you coming with the public consortium. In fact, the expectation probably is that you would. Now, of course, there is a possibility an SME can bring their own resources, bring their own funding to a project and be kind of on the industry side. But that's kind of a different question. If that's something you want to do, then maybe you can contact us. But I would say SMEs apply with the public funding.
Thank you, Colm. The next question is from Jarmo. You just want to double check something. If he understood correctly, stage 1 is the beauty contest for public sector consortium, and stage 2 is actually non-competitive, since just one project will be developed to a full proposal together with the industry.
Yes, I'd perhaps use slightly different terminology than beauty contest, but essentially here, stage 1 is the very competitive stage where multiple applicants will apply for the public funding, and only the best goes through to stage 2. And in stage 2, it's not competitive in the sense that there are multiple proposals being submitted, but there are thresholds for the evaluation, and it's up to the full proposal consortium to demonstrate that their proposal is sufficiently good enough to be funded, i.e. the evaluators will score it above the threshold. So it's not certain that whoever goes through to stage 2 will be funded, although typically, you know, the consortia, they do submit a sufficiently good proposal.
Thank you, Colm. I don't see any other question in the chat box. Please, yes, we do have a new one from Patrick. He would like to, so he's asking, could you elaborate a little more on what the industry consortium will bring in kind and in cash, will help understand the budget for IDs?
I mean, I guess I'm going to ask Emel to answer this, but before I do so, just to say in the topic text, there is a specific section on contribution from pre-identified industry consortium. So I think that, as I said in my presentation, the topic text is what the evaluators are going to use to assess your proposal. So I suggest you look at that, but maybe Emel can complement some of that information.
Yeah, I fully agree, Com. So in the topic text is we clarified what's the contribution, both the financial and the in-kind contribution from the predefined industry consortium. And as I mentioned also in my presentation, we're expecting it to be around 13.3 million euro. This is on top of also the other contribution in terms of bringing the expertise, the data, the use cases, and the access to the expertise in various multiple areas that could also help develop the topic proposal and also progress the project at the different milestones.
It's not on top.
Yeah.
This is our contribution.
Yeah, this is our contribution.
So the 13.3 million is our in-kind contribution, including expertise and use cases and so on.
Exactly. So both. That's our commitment.
Thank you, Emel. The next one is from Pratik. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what the industry consortium will bring? I just read it, sorry. So the next one is from John Mario. Is it still possible to be part of the industry consortium, and what is required?
I mean, so the industry consortium is identified in the topic text. You'll see the names of the organizations there. So that's kind of fixed at the moment. If you're an organization wanting to bring, so I would suggest if you're eligible for funding, then join through the public consortium. If you're an organization which is thinking about bringing its own contribution to projects such as this, I think what you should do is wait until the project is launched, and then it's up to you to demonstrate to that consortium that that they would want you to join them. But that's quite a bit down the road. Perhaps you could contact us offline and at the info desk, and we can explain this process a little bit better. But for now, the focus is on the public consortium. I would suggest, if possible, you join a good public consortium, publicly funded consortium.
Thank you, Colm. Now we have Ellen asking, should we mention synergies with older projects such as Hero Hope, Bridge Health, Big Data for Better Outcomes that weren't in the list in the call?
Yeah, I think I can answer that. We have looked at the possible synergies with other ongoing initiatives, and we are aware of them. And of course, if you see within your consortium other initiative that could have a synergy or complement the topic text, you can mention them. If you see that they're not mentioned and they're not captured in the topic text. But I think the message within the topic text that we would like to explore the synergies with all the ongoing initiatives and also complement, if possible, what are and complement the other ongoing initiatives. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can add. I mean, we're obviously quite aware that this is a very hot space at the moment. There's a lot of people working on this. It's an exciting space to work on. We obviously don't want to duplicate too much what's going on out there. Rather do something which is new, and therefore, yes, synergies are good as long as we can build on them. And I think if you look at the topic text, the first bullet point under scope is to map other relevant initiatives across Europe and their outcomes so that this project can build on top of them. So just to say that's something you can bring in to your proposal.
Thank you. The next one is from Carla. So she wants to have some confirmation, and she's writing us, one single proposal will move to stage 2 with a max budget of 26.6 million euros. If the second stage proposal is not above threshold, this call will not fund any project at all? Question mark.
So first of all, just to clarify the budget available for the public organizations. Again, and if you read the topic text, the section under indicative budget, the financial contribution to publicly funded organizations, i.e. coming from us, the IHI office, is 13.3 million. So you, the public consortium, you're applying for 13.3 million. The industry consortium at stage 2 will then bring their own contribution, 13.3 million. So together the budget for stage 2 is 26 million. The budget for stage 1 is 13.3. And yes, indeed, if for whatever reason the proposal submitted at stage 2 is not deemed to be sufficiently good enough, the quality is not there, it will not be funded, and there'll be no project coming from this particular topic.
Thank you, Colm. And Carla is asking a second question. May a proposal that is under evaluation under a non-IHI RIA call be submitted here?
So obviously, again, building on synergies, we want something which addresses our topic. I'm not aware of other specific topics out there that are similar to this. So I would say that if you submit something which you've submitted elsewhere, you would probably not be successful. I think to meet the needs of our particular call, you will need to assemble a unique consortium. You make sure your proposal is addressing the needs of this particular topic, and then the evaluators will assess whether it's good enough to be funded or not. And again, we don't want to fund the same thing twice. You'd have to demonstrate what you were doing is new and synergizes with other things, but doesn't necessarily duplicate them. So I would say I would doubt a proposal copy-pasted from somewhere else would be successful, because this is a particularly unique topic.
Thank you, Colm. I don't see any other question in the chat box. No, let me take you. We still have like 3 minutes before we close the session. So take your time to address your question in the chat box. Meanwhile, I would like to quickly share with you the marketplace that we have on the platform. So to take advantage for you to find partners to create a consortia. So it's really 4 easy steps. So you register to your profile, the platform, you go in the marketplace in the menu tab, and then you select the project cooperation. As a step 3, you select the call topic text that you are interested in, and on the right side you can browse and find your partners. And for you to be able to meet them, you just oh my God, sorry. You just make yourself available to have meetings with them. So you make yourself available to the platform, you find partners in the participant tab, so you have them all there, sorted by organization or by names if you know them already. You enter your meeting details and you can send them messages, and then you send your request and wait for a reply. So I can see that we have new questions in from Kale again. So as for the scope of action, should the phase 1 proposal only look at the level of action that can be achieved with public budget, or should the scope already consider the full 26.6 million? Essentially, are we writing the impact/action considering that budget of the project is 13.3 million or 26.6 million?
So yeah, so first of all, I would say you should look at the evaluation criteria, because they are different for stage 1 and stage 2, and that the page limit at stage 1 is less, it's 20 pages. So there's less expectation that you go into such depth as you would at the second stage. At the same time, you have to address the impact in the topic text, all the impacts, and make sure they're addressed well. So that you can demonstrate that what you're going to do will address those. I would say in terms of looking at stage 2, stage 1, you should make sure that take into account the contributions from the pre-identified industry consortium as detailed in the topic text, address the full scope of the impacts. In other words, what you expect to do in the final project.
Thank you, Colm. I don't see any more questions in the chat box. So it's time for us to end this session. I would like to thank you, Emel, Antoine, Colm, for your participation and answering the question. And thank you to the audience for the interest in this IHI topic. And the only thing that I would say is good luck for your proposal, and see you this afternoon for the ones who will be registered to this afternoon session. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone, and I wish you good luck as well.